Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell stepped onto the concrete training ground at Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado, California. The morning sun cast long shadows across the obstacle course that would become her proving ground for the next several months. At 28 years old, she carried herself with quiet confidence, her auburn hair pulled back in regulation style, green eyes scanning the facility with tactical precision. The other recruits were already gathered in formation, their conversations dying down as they noticed her approach. She could feel their stares, some curious, others skeptical. Among the 32 candidates beginning basic underwater demolition SEAL training, she was one of only 3 women, and the only one holding an officer rank. "Well, what do we have here?" came a voice from behind her. Sarah turned to see Petty Officer First Class Jake Morrison, a muscular man in his early 30s with arms crossed and a smirk playing on his lips. "Looks like they're sending desk jockeys to play soldier now." Several recruits chuckled, and Sarah felt the familiar weight of having to prove herself all over again. She had faced this before during her Naval Academy years, then again during her initial officer training. Each time she had to demonstrate that her presence wasn't a publicity stunt or social experiment. "I'm Lieutenant Mitchell," she said simply, extending her hand. Morrison looked at it for a moment before reluctantly shaking it, his grip unnecessarily firm. "Morrison, been in the teams for 8 years, you?" His tone suggested he already knew the answer wouldn't impress him. "Fresh out of officer training," Sarah replied honestly. She could have mentioned her advanced degrees in mechanical engineering and her top scores in every physical and academic evaluation, but experience had taught her that credentials meant nothing here until proven in action. Another recruit, Seaman Rodriguez, joined the conversation. "Lieutenant, huh? So you'll be giving us orders?" The question carried an undertone of amusement that several others picked up on. "That depends on where we all end up after training," Sarah replied diplomatically. She understood the dynamics at play. These men had worked hard to earn their shot at becoming SEALs, and some saw her presence as an unwelcome change to their brotherhood. Chief Petty Officer Williams approached the group, his weathered face showing no emotion. "Listen up, candidates. In about 10 minutes, you'll meet your instructors. They don't care about your rank, your background, or your feelings. The only thing that matters here is whether you can complete the mission and bring your teammates home alive." As Williams walked away, Morrison leaned closer to Sarah. "Here's some free advice, Lieutenant. That gold bar on your collar might mean something in the regular Navy, but down here in the dirt, it's just another target. The instructors are going to push you twice as hard because of it." Sarah nodded, appreciating the warning even if it came with a side of condescension. "I wouldn't expect anything less." The truth was, she had specifically requested the most challenging assignments throughout her career. Growing up as the daughter of a decorated Marine colonel, she had learned early that respect was earned through action, not given because of position. Her father had taught her that leadership meant being the first one into danger and the last one to quit. As more recruits gathered, Sarah noticed the subtle ways they excluded her from their conversations. When they talked about previous military experience, they directed questions to everyone except her. When they shared stories about their motivations for joining SEAL training, they seemed to forget she was standing right there. The isolation wasn't new, but it still stung. She had joined the Navy to serve her country and push her own limits, not to make political statements. Yet everywhere she went, her presence seemed to generate controversy and assumptions about her motivations. Instructor Petty Officer First Class Davis appeared without warning, his voice cutting through the morning air like a blade. "Drop and give me 50. All of you now." The candidates immediately hit the ground and began push-ups. Sarah kept pace with the group, her form precise and controlled. She could feel Davis watching her specifically, looking for any sign of weakness or special treatment. "Faster, Lieutenant," Davis barked. "Your teammates' lives depend on your speed." Sarah increased her pace, pushing through the burn in her shoulders and arms. Beside her, Morrison was breathing hard but maintaining his rhythm. She could sense him glancing at her, perhaps surprised that she wasn't falling behind. When they finished, Davis had them line up for equipment inspection. Each candidate had to demonstrate their knowledge of every piece of gear they would use during training. When he reached Sarah, his questions were more detailed and technical than those he asked the others. "What's the maximum effective range of the M4 carbine with standard ammunition, Lieutenant?" 500 meters for point targets, 600 for area targets, Instructor Davis. Water temperature threshold for hypothermia onset during extended submersion? Below 70 degrees Fahrenheit, with rapid onset below 60 degrees, Instructor Davis. Davis moved on without comment, but Sarah caught a slight nod of approval. Small victories, she reminded herself. Each correct answer, each completed exercise, each moment she proved she belonged here was progress. During the lunch break, she sat alone while the other candidates clustered in groups. She could hear fragments of their conversations, speculation about who would make it through the training and who would ring the bell to quit. Several times she heard references to the female officer that stopped abruptly when speakers noticed her proximity. As she finished her meal, Rodriguez approached her table. "Lieutenant, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Why SEALs?" "I mean, you could have had any job in the Navy with your education and rank. Why choose the hardest one?" Sarah considered her answer carefully. "Same reason you did, I imagine. To see if I could do it. To serve at the highest level possible." Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. "Fair enough. For what it's worth, you held your own pretty well this morning." It was the first acknowledgement from any of the recruits that she had performed adequately. Sarah felt a small spark of hope that maybe, eventually, she could earn their respect through performance rather than politics. As the afternoon training session began, she prepared herself for whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that every day would be a test not just of her physical and mental capabilities, but of her determination to prove that she belonged among America's elite warriors. 3 weeks into basic underwater demolition SEAL training, the initial group of 32 candidates had already shrunk to 24. The famous bell that marked voluntary withdrawal had rung 8 times, each chime echoing across the compound like a death knell for broken dreams. Sarah had survived the initial shock of SEAL training, but the real tests were just beginning. Hell Week loomed ahead. 5.5 days of continuous training with a maximum of 4 hours of sleep total. Many considered it the make-or-break point of Bud's training. The morning started with surf torture, an exercise designed to push candidates beyond their mental breaking point. Sarah lay in the frigid Pacific Ocean surf alongside her classmates, the waves crashing over their bodies as they linked arms to maintain formation. The water temperature was 58 degrees, cold enough to induce hypothermia within an hour. Instructor Davis paced the shoreline, his voice carrying over the sound of crashing waves. "Comfort is the enemy of excellence. Your enemies won't care if you're cold, tired, or scared. They'll use your weakness against you." Sarah's teeth chattered uncontrollably as salt water filled her mouth and nose with each wave. Beside her, Morrison's face had turned blue, but his grip on her arm remained steady. Despite their rocky start, they had developed a grudging mutual respect through shared suffering. "Mitchell, you still think this is worth it?" Morrison asked through chattering teeth during a brief lull between waves. "Ask me again in 6 months," Sarah replied, managing a weak smile despite her numbness. After 40 minutes in the surf, the candidates were ordered out for physical training. Their wet uniforms clung to their bodies as they began an endless series of push-ups, sit-ups, and flutter kicks. Sarah's muscles screamed in protest, but she matched the pace of her classmates rep for rep. Seaman Rodriguez, who had shown her small kindnesses during the early weeks, was struggling. His form deteriorated with each exercise, and Sarah could see him fighting back tears of frustration. Without thinking, she began counting cadence loud enough for him to hear, helping him maintain rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 1. 1, 2, 3, 2. Her voice cut through his mental fog, providing an anchor point to focus on. Instructor Williams noticed the interaction and walked over. Sarah braced herself for punishment, knowing that helping struggling classmates was often viewed as enabling weakness. "Interesting technique, Lieutenant. You think Rodriguez needs a babysitter?" "No, Instructor Williams. I think he needs a teammate." Williams studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Carry on." The response surprised Sarah. She had expected to be punished for her intervention, but Williams seemed to appreciate her instinct to support a struggling teammate, rather than let him fail alone. Later that day, during combat conditioning, the candidates were divided into boat crews for beach runs carrying inflatable boats over their heads. Sarah found herself assigned to Morrison's crew, along with Rodriguez and 3 other recruits. The boat weighed approximately 200 pounds, requiring perfect coordination among the 6-person crew to carry it efficiently. As they began their run along the beach, it became clear that their crew was falling behind the others. "We need to pick up the pace," Morrison called out, his voice strained from the effort. "Rodriguez is struggling," replied Thompson, another crew member. "Maybe he should drop back to a support role." Sarah could see Rodriguez's face tighten with determination and frustration. She had watched him during previous exercises and knew he had the heart to continue, even if his body was reaching its limits. "Negative," Sarah said firmly. "We adjust our positioning to support him, not abandon him." Morrison shot her a surprised look. As the senior enlisted man, he was technically the crew leader, but Sarah's suggestion made tactical sense. "What do you have in mind, Lieutenant?" "Rodriguez takes the front right position where he can set the pace. Thompson and Williams take the heavy rear positions. We'll match his rhythm instead of forcing him to match ours." The adjustment worked. Instead of Rodriguez being dragged along by the other's pace, the crew moved as a coordinated unit. They began catching up to the other crews, and Rodriguez's confidence visibly improved. During the post-exercise debriefing, Instructor Davis addressed the crew's performance. Boat Crew 5 showed significant improvement during the second half of the exercise. Anyone want to explain why? Morrison surprised Sarah by speaking up. "Lieutenant Mitchell suggested a tactical adjustment to our formation, Instructor Davis. It maximized our crew's efficiency." Davis nodded approvingly. "Leadership isn't about rank or authority. It's about making decisions that improve mission effectiveness. Remember that." As the weeks progressed, Sarah noticed subtle changes in how her classmates treated her. The casual dismissals and skeptical comments became less frequent. When she offered suggestions during team exercises, they listened. When she struggled with particular challenges, they offered encouragement rather than judgment. The breakthrough came during a night navigation exercise. The candidates were divided into teams and tasked with reaching specific coordinates using only map and compass, while carrying full combat loads. Sarah's team included Morrison, Rodriguez, and 2 other recruits she hadn't worked with extensively. 3 hours into the exercise, they realized they had made a navigation error and were significantly off course. With only 2 hours remaining to reach their objective, panic began to set in among the team members. "We're screwed," muttered Jackson, one of the recruits. "There's no way we can make up this distance in time." Sarah studied the map by red flashlight, calculating distances and possible routes. "Actually, there is, but it requires us to take a more direct route through the marsh instead of following the established trails." Morrison examined the route she was proposing. "That's going to be rough terrain in the dark. Lots of opportunities to get injured or lose equipment." "True," Sarah acknowledged, "but it cuts our remaining distance by almost 30%. If we maintain discipline and watch out for each other, we can make it." The team voted to follow her suggestion. The next 2 hours tested every bit of their training as they navigated through knee-deep marsh water, tangled vegetation, and unstable ground. Sarah took point, using her compass and map-reading skills to guide them through the treacherous terrain. When they reached their objective with 15 minutes to spare, the relief was palpable. More importantly, Sarah had proven her value as a tactical leader and navigator under pressure. As they waited for extraction, Morrison approached her. "That was solid leadership back there, Lieutenant. You saved our collective butts." "We did it as a team," Sarah replied, but she couldn't hide her satisfaction at the acknowledgement. "Yeah, but you made the call when it mattered. That takes guts." For the first time since beginning Bud S training, Sarah felt like she was earning genuine respect rather than grudging tolerance. The road ahead was still long and challenging, but she was no longer walking it alone. Hell Week arrived like a storm everyone could see coming, but no one could truly prepare for. Sarah stood in formation with 17 remaining candidates as Instructor Davis delivered the briefing that would begin their journey into controlled madness. "For the next 5.5 days, you will be tested beyond anything you have experienced. You will be cold, wet, sandy, and exhausted. Some of you will quit. Some of you will be injured. A few of you might discover what you're truly capable of when everything comfortable is stripped away." The bell sat prominently displayed nearby, its brass surface gleaming in the pre-dawn light. Next to it lay a neat pile of helmets belonging to candidates who had already rung out during the previous weeks. Sarah forced herself not to look at it, focusing instead on the challenges ahead. The first event was a 14-mile run in full gear, followed immediately by a 2-mile ocean swim. Sarah had prepared for this moment for months, building her endurance and mental toughness through increasingly difficult training. But nothing could fully simulate the cumulative effect of sleep deprivation combined with constant physical stress. By hour 18, the hallucinations began. Sarah found herself seeing movement in her peripheral vision that wasn't there, hearing voices that belonged to no one present. During a brief rest period, she caught Rodriguez talking earnestly to a tree, apparently convinced it was giving him tactical advice. "Rodriguez," she whispered, gently touching his shoulder. "You're talking to a tree, brother." He blinked several times, then looked embarrassed. "Thanks, Lieutenant. This is getting weird. Stay close to me. We'll keep each other grounded." The buddy system became crucial as exhaustion pushed all the candidates toward their breaking points. Sarah found herself paired with Morrison during many exercises, their previous antagonism replaced by mutual dependence. When she stumbled during a beach run, he steadied her. When he struggled to stay awake during a briefing, she discreetly elbowed him alert. On the third night, during a particularly brutal exercise involving log carries and surf torture, Thompson finally broke. Sarah watched him stand up slowly during a break, walk deliberately to the bell and ring it 3 times. The sound cut through the night air like a funeral dirge. "Another one bites the dust," muttered Jackson, one of the remaining candidates. "Show some respect," Morrison snapped. Thompson gave everything he had. "That takes courage, too." Sarah appreciated Morrison's defense of their fallen teammate. She had watched Thompson struggle for days, pushing himself far beyond what should have been possible. His decision to quit wasn't weakness. It was recognition of his limits. As Thompson gathered his gear and disappeared into the night, the remaining candidates seemed to draw closer together. They were down to 14 now, a tight group bound by shared suffering and mutual respect. The 4th day brought underwater knot-tying exercises that pushed Sarah to her limits. Candidates had to swim to the bottom of a pool, tie specific knots while holding their breath, then surface before passing out. The exercise was designed to test composure under extreme stress. Sarah had always been a strong swimmer, but the cumulative fatigue of Hell Week made everything more difficult. On her 3rd attempt at tying a bowline underwater, her vision began to tunnel and her lungs burned for air. The temptation to surface early was overwhelming, but she forced herself to complete the knot before swimming up. She broke the surface gasping, her chest heaving as she fought to regain her breath. Instructor Williams was waiting at the pool edge, his stopwatch in hand. "Time, Lieutenant?" 43 seconds, Instructor Williams," she managed between gasps. "Standard is 45 seconds. "Well done." The small acknowledgement meant everything. Each successful exercise was proof that she belonged here, that her presence wasn't a mistake or an experiment. During a rare 2-hour sleep period on the 4th night, Sarah found herself lying on the ground next to Rodriguez and Morrison. Despite their exhaustion, sleep was elusive. Their bodies were too amped up on adrenaline and stress hormones to fully relax. "You know what's funny?" Rodriguez whispered in the darkness. 3 weeks ago, I wasn't sure if having a female officer in our class was a good idea. "And now?" Sarah asked quietly. "Now I'm just glad you're on my team. You've saved my butt more times than I can count." Morrison rolled over to face them. "Same here. I figured you'd wash out in the 1st week. Turns out you're tougher than half the guys who've already quit." "Thanks," Sarah replied simply. The acknowledgement meant more than they could possibly know. "I keep thinking about my daughter," Morrison continued. "She's 8 years old and she always asks me what heroes look like. I used to give her some generic answer about courage and strength. Now I think I'll tell her they look like people who refuse to quit even when quitting makes perfect sense." Rodriguez chuckled softly. "Deep thoughts for someone running on 2 hours of sleep in 4 days. Sleep deprivation makes philosophers of us all," Sarah replied. The final day of Hell Week dawned gray and cold, matching the candidates' mental state. They had been pushed to the absolute edge of human endurance, but the finish line was finally visible. The last exercise was a grueling obstacle course that incorporated every skill they had learned during Bud's training. Sarah approached each obstacle with methodical precision, drawing on reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed. Her movements were automatic now, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought had become unreliable. The rope climb nearly defeated her. 30 feet of hemp rope stretched between her and the next obstacle, and her grip strength was nearly gone. Halfway up, her hands began to slip and she felt herself starting to slide back down. "Come on, Lieutenant," Morrison shouted from below. "Don't you dare quit on us now!" His voice cut through her mental fog, reminding her that she wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for Rodriguez, who had overcome his early struggles through sheer determination. She was fighting for Morrison, who had evolved from skeptic to supporter. She was fighting for every woman who would follow in her footsteps. With a surge of adrenaline born from desperation, Sarah tightened her grip and hauled herself to the top of the rope. The bell at the finish line grew larger with each obstacle, and finally, impossibly, she crossed the final marker. Hell Week was over. Of the 32 candidates who had started Bud's training, only 12 remained. Sarah had not only survived but thrived, proving to herself and others that she possessed the mental and physical toughness required of a Navy SEAL. As she stood with her surviving classmates, covered in sand and salt water, Sarah realized that something fundamental had changed. The skeptical glances and whispered doubts had been replaced by genuine camaraderie. She was no longer the female officer trying to prove herself. She was simply a teammate who had earned her place through shared adversity. But even as she savored this hard-won acceptance, Sarah knew that greater challenges lay ahead. Hell Week was just the beginning of her journey toward becoming a Navy SEAL, and each phase would bring new tests of her capabilities and resolve. 6 months after Hell Week, Sarah found herself in the advanced phases of SEAL training, specializing in underwater demolitions and tactical diving operations. The 12 candidates who had survived Bud S had been split into smaller groups for specialized training, and Sarah was excelling in areas that surprised even her instructors. Her background in mechanical engineering proved invaluable when learning to calculate explosive charges for underwater obstacles. While other candidates struggled with the mathematical concepts, Sarah quickly grasped the relationships between explosive force water density and structural engineering that determined successful demolition operations. Mitchell, explain the calculation for breaching a concrete pier support underwater, Instructor Chief Petty Officer Reynolds called out during a classroom session. Sarah stood and approached the whiteboard, her confidence evident as she worked through the complex formula. The explosive force must account for water's incompressibility, which means we need approximately 30% more charge than the same operation would require on land. Additionally, the shaped charge must be positioned to direct maximum force through the concrete's weakest structural points. Reynolds nodded approvingly. Correct. And why is timing crucial in underwater demolitions? Water conducts the shockwave more efficiently than air, so charges detonated simultaneously will interfere with each other. Proper sequencing ensures each charge achieves maximum effect without compromising adjacent explosions. Outstanding. Take your seat. Morrison, who sat behind her, leaned forward as she returned to her chair. Show off, he whispered with a grin. Just doing my job, Sarah replied, but she couldn't suppress a small smile. Their friendship had deepened considerably since Hell Week. Morrison had become one of her strongest supporters, and his early skepticism had transformed into genuine respect for her capabilities. Rodriguez had also grown into a reliable teammate, his initial struggles overcome through persistence and mutual support from the group. The practical application of their classroom learning came during a nighttime exercise in San Diego Bay. The candidates were tasked with infiltrating a mock enemy harbor, placing simulated charges on designated targets and extracting without detection. Sarah was assigned as the demolition specialist for her 4-person team. As they prepared their equipment on the beach, Morrison checked his dive gear one final time. Remember, we have 45 minutes from water entry to extraction. The patrol boats run regular sweeps every 20 minutes, so timing is critical. Sarah secured her explosive simulators to her dive belt, each one representing a real charge that would be used in actual combat operations. Roger that. The target is a concrete piling supporting the main pier. I'll need approximately 3 minutes to properly place and arm the device. Rodriguez adjusted his rebreather apparatus, the specialized diving equipment that would prevent telltale bubbles from revealing their position. What's our backup plan if the patrol boats change their schedule? We adapt and overcome, replied Jackson, their team leader. But let's focus on executing the primary plan first. The 4 divers slipped into the cold Pacific water, their movements silent and coordinated. Sarah had discovered that she possessed exceptional underwater navigation skills, able to maintain precise compass headings even in zero visibility conditions. This ability made her invaluable during night infiltration exercises. 20 feet below the surface, they moved through the murky water like shadows. Sarah's dive light was covered with a red filter that preserved night vision, while providing just enough illumination to read her compass and depth gauge. The target pier appeared out of the darkness ahead, its massive concrete supports extending deep into the harbor bottom. Sarah approached the designated piling and began her work. The simulated explosive device had to be placed at exactly the right location to achieve maximum structural damage. Too high, and the blast would be absorbed by the water without significantly damaging the concrete. Too low, and the device might be buried in harbor bottom sediment, reducing its effectiveness. She worked methodically, using hand signals to communicate with Morrison, who served as her security watch. In actual combat, this operation would be conducted under extreme stress with the knowledge that discovery meant almost certain death. The training scenarios attempted to replicate that pressure through time constraints and the possibility of failure if they were detected by instructors playing the role of enemy sentries. With 2 minutes remaining in her time window, Sarah completed the placement and armed the simulated device. She gave Morrison the thumbs-up signal indicating mission completion, and the team began their careful withdrawal from the target area. The extraction phase proved more challenging than anticipated. A patrol boat had deviated from its predicted schedule and was conducting an extended search pattern near their planned exit point. Jackson made the tactical decision to delay their surface until the patrol moved to a different area. The team spent an additional 15 minutes underwater, relying on their rebreather systems to avoid detection. Sarah monitored her gas supply carefully, knowing that running out of breathing gas underwater was a potentially fatal scenario. The margin for error was slim, but their training had prepared them for exactly these types of complications. When they finally surfaced at the designated extraction point, Instructor Reynolds was waiting with a stopwatch and evaluation forms. Time from infiltration to extraction, 63 minutes. 18 minutes over your planned schedule. Explain the delay. Jackson, as team leader, responded first. Patrol boat deviated from predicted pattern, sir. We delayed extraction to avoid detection. Mitchell, assessment of your demolition placement? Sarah treaded water while delivering her report. Device placed at optimal position for maximum structural damage, sir. Time required was within planned parameters. No complications with equipment or procedure. Reynolds made notes on his waterproof clipboard. Overall assessment, mission successful despite timing complications. Good adaptation to changing tactical situation. Mitchell, your technical execution was textbook perfect. As they swam to shore, Morrison caught up with Sarah. Nice work back there. That placement was absolutely perfect, thanks. It's starting to feel natural, like all the pieces are coming together. That's because you're becoming a SEAL. Rodriguez added from behind them. The training is working. Back on the beach, as they cleaned and inventoried their equipment, Sarah reflected on how far she had come. The mocking comments and skeptical looks that had greeted her arrival were now distant memories. She had proven herself through performance, earning the respect of her teammates and instructors through competence rather than politics. But she also understood that her journey was far from over. Each phase of training brought new challenges and higher stakes. The men who became Navy SEALs were among the most elite warriors in the world, and she was determined to meet that same standard, regardless of the additional scrutiny her presence generated. Chief Reynolds approached the group as they finished their equipment checks. Outstanding work tonight, all of you. You're beginning to think and operate like SEALs rather than candidates. Mitchell, I want to see you for a moment. Sarah's stomach tightened slightly. Private conversations with instructors could go either way. Positive feedback or identification of deficiencies that needed immediate correction. Yes, Chief, your technical skills are exceptional, and your underwater capabilities are among the best I've seen in 15 years of instruction. Have you given thought to which SEAL team you'd like to request after graduation? The question surprised her. It was the first time an instructor had spoken about her future assignment as a certainty rather than a possibility. I'd be honored to serve wherever the Navy needs me most, Chief. Reynolds smiled slightly. That's the right answer, Lieutenant. But start thinking about your preferences. Teams have different specializations, and your skills would be valuable in several different contexts. As Reynolds walked away, Sarah realized she had crossed another invisible threshold. She was no longer fighting just to survive training. She was being evaluated for where she could make the most significant contribution as a fully qualified Navy SEAL. 8 months into training, Sarah faced her final evaluation exercise, a comprehensive mission simulation that would determine whether she graduated to become a Navy SEAL or was reassigned to conventional naval duties. The scenario was designed to test every skill she had learned: underwater infiltration, demolitions, small unit tactics, leadership under pressure, and the ability to adapt when operations went sideways. Only 8 candidates remained from the original 32 who had started Budus. Sarah, Morrison, Rodriguez, and Jackson had formed a tight-knit team throughout training, supporting each other through increasingly difficult challenges. Their bond had been forged through shared hardship and mutual respect, earned through demonstrated competence. The mission briefing took place in a secure classroom at the Naval Special Warfare Command. Instructor Chief Reynolds, now wearing his dress uniform instead of training gear, presented the scenario with the gravity befitting a final examination. Your target is a simulated enemy facility on San Clemente Island. Intelligence indicates the presence of high-value targets and sensitive materials that must be captured or destroyed. Your insertion will be by submarine, followed by a 2-mile underwater approach to the target beach. Sarah studied the aerial photographs and tactical maps spread across the briefing table. The target facility was a complex of buildings surrounded by defensive positions and patrol routes. Success would require precise coordination, flawless execution, and the ability to adapt when the inevitable complications arose. Environmental conditions include cold water temperature, strong currents, and limited visibility. Weather forecast shows increasing wind and sea state throughout the operation window. Questions? Morrison raised his hand. Rules of engagement, Chief. Simulated enemies are played by advanced SEAL operators from active teams. They know you're coming and will employ realistic countermeasures. Treat them as hostile combatants with the skills to match. Rodriguez checked his notes. Time limit for mission completion? You have 6 hours from submarine insertion to extraction. Miss your pickup window and you fail the exercise. Jackson reviewed the demolition requirements. Explosive charges or live ordnance? Affirmative. This is as close to real-world operations as training allows. The margin for error is slim, and the consequences of mistakes are severe. Sarah felt her pulse quicken with anticipation rather than anxiety. After months of preparation, she was ready to prove herself in a scenario that closely approximated actual combat operations. The technical challenges played to her strengths, while the physical demands would test the endurance and mental toughness she had developed through countless hours of training. The submarine insertion took place at 200 hours, 40 miles off the coast of San Clemente Island. Sarah and her 3 teammates checked their equipment one final time as the submarine's crew prepared for their underwater departure. Each diver carried specialized rebreather apparatus, navigation equipment, weapons, and explosive charges. Last chance to back out. Lieutenant, Morrison said with a grin as he adjusted his dive mask. Not a chance, Sarah replied. I've come too far to quit now. The submarine's torpedo room flooded slowly as the team prepared for their underwater exit. Sarah controlled her breathing carefully, knowing that the next several hours would test every skill she had learned during training. The cold Pacific water rushed in around them as the submarine's outer door opened to reveal the dark ocean beyond. Swimming in formation 2 miles underwater required navigation skills that few people possessed. Sarah served as the primary navigator, using compass bearings and elapsed time calculations to guide the team toward their target beach. The current was stronger than predicted, requiring constant course corrections to maintain their planned route. 90 minutes after leaving the submarine, they reached the rocky coastline of San Clemente Island. Sarah's navigation had been nearly perfect, bringing them within 50 meters of their planned landing site despite the challenging conditions. They surfaced carefully, scanning for enemy patrols before moving onto the beach. The approach to the target facility required them to traverse nearly a mile of rough terrain while avoiding detection by roving patrols. Sarah's role was to neutralize the facility's communications equipment, while Jackson's team eliminated the simulated guards. The coordination had to be precise, as any mistake would compromise the entire mission. As they moved through the darkness, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her situation had changed since the first day of training. The men who had initially questioned her presence now trusted her completely, relying on her technical expertise and tactical judgment without hesitation. The transformation hadn't been easy, but it had been earned through consistent performance under pressure. The target facility appeared ahead, illuminated by security lights that created both opportunities and challenges for their approach. Sarah identified the communications building, a small structure housing the electronic equipment that would allow the enemy to call for reinforcements if the attack was detected. "Come. Building is 50 meters northeast of the main. Target," she whispered into her radio. "I need 8 minutes to place charges and disable backup systems." "Roger," Jackson replied. "We'll begin our approach when you're in position." Sarah moved through the shadows like a ghost, her black wetsuit and equipment making her nearly invisible against the dark landscape. The months of training had taught her to move silently, despite carrying 30 pounds of gear, and she covered the distance to the communications building without triggering any alarms. The building's security was more sophisticated than expected. Instead of a simple lock, the door featured an electronic keypad that would require additional time to bypass. Sarah quickly assessed her options, knowing that every minute of delay increased the risk of detection. She chose to place her explosive charges on the building's external power supply instead of attempting to enter the structure. The demolition would achieve the same tactical objective while avoiding the time delay of bypassing electronic security. It was the kind of adaptive thinking that separated successful special operations personnel from those who failed under pressure. As she armed the charges, Sarah heard the distinctive sound of approaching footsteps. An enemy patrol had deviated from its predicted route and was heading directly toward her position. She had perhaps 30 seconds before discovery, not enough time to complete her task and escape undetected. Instead of aborting the mission, Sarah made a split-second decision that demonstrated the tactical judgment her instructors had worked to develop. She finished arming the charges, then used her radio to alert Jackson's team. "Contact imminent to comm building. Proceeding with demolition as planned." "Negative, abort and withdraw," Jackson responded immediately. "Mission success requires comm disruption. Continuing as planned." Sarah triggered the charges just as the enemy patrol rounded the corner of the building. The explosion eliminated the facility's communications capability, but also revealed her position to the opposing forces. What followed was a running firefight that tested every combat skill she had learned during training. Using simulated ammunition, she engaged the enemy patrol while withdrawing toward the main facility, where her teammates were conducting their assault. Her marksmanship training proved invaluable as she neutralized multiple opponents while moving through difficult terrain in darkness. The mission concluded successfully with all objectives achieved within the time limit. As the extraction helicopter approached their designated pickup point, Sarah realized she had passed her final test, not just through technical competence, but by demonstrating the aggressive tactical mindset that defined Navy SEAL operations. Chief Reynolds met them at the helicopter landing zone, his expression revealing nothing about their performance evaluation. "Debrief in 30 minutes, he announced as they climbed aboard the aircraft. But Sarah could see the slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth, and she knew that after 8 months of the most challenging training in the military, she had finally earned the right to call herself a Navy SEAL. 2 years after completing SEAL training, Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell had been assigned to SEAL Team 7, where she quickly established herself as one of the unit's most capable operators. Her reputation for technical expertise and cool performance under pressure had earned her respect throughout the special operations community. But she still faced occasional challenges from personnel unfamiliar with her background. The situation came to a head during a joint training exercise at Naval Base Coronado, where multiple SEAL teams were conducting coordinated operations with conventional Navy units. Sarah found herself working with a group of newly assigned petty officers who had heard about the female SEAL but had never actually worked with her. "So you're the famous Lieutenant Mitchell," said Petty Officer Second Class Barnes, a muscular man in his mid-20s with an attitude that immediately set Sarah on edge. "I heard they had to lower the standards to get you through training." Sarah was reviewing mission plans at a table in the operations center when Barnes made his comment. Several other sailors gathered around, curious to see how she would respond to the obvious provocation. "The standards weren't lowered for anyone," Sarah replied calmly, not looking up from her paperwork. "Same course, same requirements, same pass-fail criteria." "That's not what I heard," Barnes persisted. "Word is they gave you special treatment because of politics." Morrison, who had been assigned to the same team after graduation, stood up from his nearby workstation. Barnes, you might want to think carefully before you continue that line of conversation. Why? Am I not allowed to ask questions about our new teammates' qualifications? Rodriguez, also present as part of the training exercise, joined Morrison. Actually, you're not qualified to evaluate anyone's credentials. Mitchell has more successful operations under her belt than you have training exercises. The tension in the room was becoming palpable. Other personnel were starting to notice the confrontation, and Sarah realized the situation needed to be defused before it escalated further. She had faced similar challenges before, and knew that responding with anger would only validate the skepticism some people harbored about her presence in the teams. Barnes, you're welcome to review my training records and operational reports if you have concerns about my qualifications, Sarah said, finally looking up from her work. They're all properly documented and available through official channels. I'm not questioning your paperwork, Barnes replied. I'm questioning whether you can perform when it matters. Before Sarah could respond, Chief Petty Officer Martinez entered the operations center. As one of the most senior enlisted personnel in SEAL Team 7, Martinez commanded immediate respect from everyone present. His weathered face and multiple combat deployments spoke to years of operational experience. What's the issue here? Martinez asked, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to maintaining discipline in high-stress environments. Barnes straightened slightly, but maintained his confrontational posture. Just getting acquainted with our new team member, Chief. Martinez looked around the room, quickly assessing the situation. Mitchell, these sailors expressing concerns about your capabilities? Nothing I can't handle, Chief, Sarah replied diplomatically. That's not what I asked. Are they questioning your qualifications? Sarah hesitated for a moment, knowing that her answer could either escalate or resolve the situation. Some questions have been raised about training standards and operational readiness. Martinez nodded slowly, then turned to address Barnes directly. Petty Officer Barnes, what's your assessment of Lieutenant Mitchell's qualifications based on your personal experience working with her? We haven't worked together yet, Chief, so your evaluation is based on what exactly? Rumors, speculation, internet forums? Barnes realized he was on dangerous ground but pressed forward. Just general concerns about maintaining unit standards, Chief. Martinez let the comment hang in the air for a moment before responding. Barnes, you've been in the Navy for 6 years. Lieutenant Mitchell has completed more high-risk operations in the past 18 months than you've participated in during your entire career. Her technical expertise has directly contributed to mission success on multiple occasions. The room had gone completely quiet. Even personnel who hadn't been part of the original confrontation were now paying attention to Martinez's words. Furthermore, Martinez continued, questioning a teammate's qualifications based on gender, rather than demonstrated performance, is exactly the kind of thinking that gets people killed in combat. Are we clear on that point? Clear, Chief, Barnes replied, his earlier bravado now noticeably absent. Martinez wasn't finished. Mitchell, tell Barnes about the Kandahar operation last year. Sarah felt uncomfortable being put on the spot, but she understood that Martinez was using the situation as a teaching moment for the newer personnel. Standard direct action mission, she said simply. Nothing particularly noteworthy. Nothing noteworthy? Martinez's eyebrows rose in disbelief. Rodriguez, refresh my memory about the details. Rodriguez stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with the attention but recognizing the importance of setting the record straight. Taliban leadership meeting in a compound with complex underground tunnel system. Primary assault team got pinned down by unexpected resistance. Lieutenant Mitchell led a 4-person element through the tunnel network to establish a secondary breach point. Morrison added details that Sarah would never have shared herself. The tunnel system was partially flooded and required underwater navigation in complete darkness. Mitchell guided the team through nearly 200 meters of submerged passages while carrying explosive charges. The result? Martinez prompted. Mission success, Rodriguez concluded. High-value targets eliminated, no friendly casualties, and the entire team extracted safely. Barnes was now visibly uncomfortable, realizing that his assumptions about Sarah's capabilities were not only wrong, but potentially insulting to someone who had repeatedly proven herself in actual combat. Martinez turned back to Barnes. Petty Officer, do you still have concerns about Lieutenant Mitchell's qualifications? No, Chief. My apologies for any misunderstanding. Sarah appreciated the support from her teammates and Martinez, but she also recognized an opportunity to turn the confrontation into something more positive. Barnes, I understand the skepticism, she said. When I first arrived at Buddes, there were legitimate questions about whether I could meet the standards. The only way to answer those questions was through performance. I'm happy to work with you during this exercise so you can evaluate my capabilities firsthand. The gesture was both gracious and tactically smart. By offering to work with Barnes rather than simply dismissing him, Sarah demonstrated the kind of leadership that had earned her respect throughout the special operations community. Martinez nodded approvingly. Outstanding. Barnes, you'll be assigned to Lieutenant Mitchell's element for tomorrow's exercise. Consider it a learning opportunity. As the group dispersed to continue their mission planning, Morrison approached Sarah privately. You handled that well, he said quietly. Could have gotten ugly if you'd let it. It's not the first time, and it probably won't be the last, Sarah replied. The best response is always to let the work speak for itself. Yeah, but it shouldn't be necessary. Your record speaks for itself. Sarah appreciated Morrison's loyalty, but she also understood the reality of her situation. Change takes time. Every positive interaction helps establish credibility for the women who will follow. As she returned to her mission planning, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since her early days in SEAL training. The crude jokes and open skepticism had largely disappeared, replaced by professional respect based on demonstrated competence. But occasional challenges like the one with Barnes served as reminders that her presence in the teams was still noteworthy to some people. The important thing was that her teammates trusted her completely, and that trust had been earned through shared dangers and successful missions. That foundation of mutual respect was what truly mattered in the demanding world of special operations. 3 years after completing SEAL training, Sarah had been promoted to lieutenant commander and was serving as the operations officer for SEAL Team 7. Her reputation had grown beyond the special operations community, and she frequently briefed senior naval officers on counterterrorism operations and tactical innovations her team had developed. On this particular morning, she was conducting a training debrief with a mixed group of junior officers, senior enlisted personnel, and several visiting officials from Naval Special Warfare Command. The exercise had involved complex urban warfare scenarios, and Sarah was presenting lessons learned to help improve future training protocols. Among the audience were several young petty officers who had recently completed Buddes training, including Petty Officer Barnes, who had become one of her most reliable team members after their initial confrontation 2 years earlier. The transformation in his attitude had been complete, and he now served as an informal advocate for Sarah's leadership within the younger enlisted ranks. The key tactical modification we implemented was the use of sequential breaching charges, rather than simultaneous detonation, Sarah explained, using a digital presentation to illustrate the technique. This approach reduced structural damage while maintaining tactical surprise. A hand went up in the back of the room. Ma'am, what about the risk of alert status escalation between the first and second breaches? Sarah recognized the questioner as Seaman Apprentice Collins, one of the newest graduates from Bud's training. His question demonstrated sophisticated tactical thinking that impressed her. Excellent question, Collins. The time interval between charges is critical. Our testing showed that keeping the delay under 4 seconds prevented effective enemy response, while allowing structural stresses to distribute properly. As she continued the briefing, Sarah noticed a commotion near the back of the room. A senior officer she didn't recognize had entered and was speaking quietly with Commander Hayes, the Team 7 commanding officer. Hayes's expression suggested the conversation was significant. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, Hayes interrupted politely. Could you pause your briefing for a moment? We have some distinguished visitors who would like to observe your presentation. Sarah nodded and watched as Hayes escorted a small group of senior officers to seats in the front row. Even from across the room, she could see the abundance of ribbons and insignia that indicated very high rank. One officer in particular, a distinguished woman in her 60s, commanded immediate attention from everyone present. Please continue, Lieutenant Commander, Hayes said. Don't let us interrupt your excellent presentation. Sarah resumed her briefing, but she could feel the additional scrutiny from the visiting officers. Their presence suggested that this was more than a routine training observation. though she couldn't imagine what had drawn such senior attention to a standard debrief session. As she concluded her presentation and opened the floor for questions, the senior female officer raised her hand. "Lieutenant Commander, in your assessment, how have the tactical innovations your team developed influenced broader special operations doctrine?" The question was more complex than typical training debrief inquiries, suggesting that the officer was well-versed in special operations capabilities and development. "Ma'am, our modifications have been incorporated into standard operating procedures for urban warfare scenarios across naval special warfare. The techniques have also been shared with other service branches through joint training exercises. And the operational impact of these innovations?" Sarah chose her words carefully, knowing that operational details were often classified. "Measurable improvements in mission success rates and reduced collateral damage in complex urban environments." The officer nodded approvingly. "Thank you. Outstanding presentation." As the audience dispersed, Commander Hayes approached Sarah with the visiting officers. "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, I'd like you to meet Rear Admiral Patricia Morrison, Deputy Commander of Naval Special Warfare Command." Sarah's stomach tightened slightly as she recognized the significance of the introduction. Morrison was one of the most senior women in the Navy and held enormous influence over special operations policy and personnel decisions. "Admiral Morrison, it's an honor to meet you," Sarah said, extending her hand. "The honor is mine, Lieutenant Commander. Your reputation precedes you, and your presentation today was exceptional." Morrison turned to address the group that had gathered around them. "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell represents the very best of naval special warfare. Her technical expertise, leadership capabilities, and operational achievements have set new standards for excellence in special operations." The comment drew surprised looks from several personnel who hadn't expected such effusive praise from such a senior officer. Barnes, standing nearby, couldn't suppress a slight smile as he watched his former skepticism about Sarah's capabilities being validated by the highest levels of naval leadership. Morrison continued, "I've been following Lieutenant Commander Mitchell's career since her graduation from Buddhist training. Her performance has consistently exceeded expectations, and her innovations have directly contributed to mission success across multiple operational theaters." Sarah felt a mix of pride and uncertainty about where this conversation was heading. Public recognition from senior leadership was always gratifying, but it also suggested that significant changes might be forthcoming. "Admiral, I appreciate the recognition, but any success I've achieved has been the result of working with outstanding teammates and benefiting from exceptional training and support." Morrison smiled at the diplomatic response. "That's exactly the kind of humility and team-first attitude that makes you an ideal candidate for increased responsibility." The word candidate sent a chill of anticipation through Sarah. In military parlance, being described as a candidate for increased responsibility typically meant promotion, assignment to a higher-level position, or selection for advanced education and training. "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell," Morrison said formally, "I'm here to personally inform you that you've been selected for promotion to commander and assignment as the executive officer of SEAL Team 3. The promotion is effective immediately." The room went completely silent. Sarah felt as though the air had been sucked out of her lungs. Executive officer of a SEAL team was one of the most prestigious positions in naval special warfare, typically reserved for officers with extensive operational experience and proven leadership capabilities. "Admiral, I'm honored by the confidence you're placing in me." "Thank you." Morrison's expression became more serious. "Sarah, I'm going to speak frankly. Your selection for this position wasn't unanimous. There are still people within the naval hierarchy who question whether women belong in special operations, let alone in leadership positions within SEAL teams." The honesty was jarring but not entirely surprising. Sarah had always known that her presence in the teams was closely scrutinized, and that her performance carried implications beyond her individual career. "However," Morrison continued, "your operational record, leadership capabilities, and the respect you've earned from your teammates make you the most qualified candidate, regardless of gender. You've proven yourself through performance, which is the only standard that truly matters." Barnes stepped forward slightly, his voice carrying conviction as he addressed the Admiral. "Ma'am, Lieutenant Commander Mitchell is the finest officer I've had the privilege to serve under. Her leadership has directly contributed to my development as a SEAL operator. Morrison looked surprised by the unsolicited endorsement from an enlisted sailor, but she also seemed pleased by the spontaneous show of support. Rodriguez, who had also been present for the briefing, added his voice. Admiral, respectfully, there's no one in naval special warfare more qualified for this position. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell has earned it through exceptional service. Morrison nodded approvingly at the support Sarah was receiving from her subordinates. That's exactly the kind of loyalty and respect that effective leadership generates. Lieutenant Commander, are you prepared to accept this assignment? Sarah looked around the room at the faces of her teammates, seeing encouragement and pride in their expressions. Morrison, Barnes, Rodriguez, and countless others had been part of her journey from skeptical beginnings to this moment of recognition and advancement. Yes, ma'am. I'm honored to accept. Morrison extended her hand in congratulation. Outstanding. You report to SEAL Team 3 next Monday. Commander Mitchell, congratulations on a well-deserved promotion. As Morrison and her entourage departed, Sarah found herself surrounded by congratulating teammates. The journey that had begun with mockery and skepticism had culminated in recognition at the highest levels of naval leadership. Morrison approached her one final time before leaving. Jake Morrison is my nephew, he said quietly. When he told me about a female officer who had earned his respect during Bud's training, I knew you were someone special. You've exceeded even my expectations. Sarah watched him walk away, understanding finally that her journey had been observed and supported by people she never knew were paying attention. The young woman who had faced ridicule on her first day of SEAL training was now a commander in the United States Navy, selected for one of the most prestigious